Good evening. Another crowd of rule followers. Thank you for quieting down for us. My name is Beth Johnson. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, St. Louis Park. On behalf of the League, welcome all of you tonight. I'll start yelling soon. On behalf of we welcome you, the candidates, the audience, and those viewing on Civic Channel 17. It will also be posted on our Park TV YouTube page. How's that? Tonight's forum will be rerun on Civic TV Channel 17 until the completion of the general election on November 5th. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization which promotes political responsibility through informed and active participation in government. The League does not support or oppose political parties or individual candidates. We encourage each of you to get involved in your community and the political party of your choice. One way is to become a member of the League of Women Voters St. Louis Park and help us continue providing opportunities to hear candidates discuss issues that are important to you. For more information about membership, please visit lwvmn.org and look for links to the local League sites. The views in this forum are those of the candidates. Sponsorship of this forum by the League is not an endorsement of any candidate. All viable candidates have been invited. As a reminder, this election is our first ranked choice voting for the at-large seat. You aren't just choosing a candidate, but be thinking about how you prioritize them when you vote. Tonight's moderator is Eleanor Johnson. She's an experienced moderator and former president of the Brooklyn Park Osseo Maple Grove chapter of the League. Welcome, Eleanor.
Thank you, and welcome to the forum. My name is Eleanor Johnson, and I'm from Brooklyn Park Osseo Maple Grove League, and will be the moderator for the St. Louis Park Mayor and City Council Member at Large and A and B. And there are 2 candidates for mayor, 3 candidates for City Council Member at Large A, and 2 candidates for City Council Member at Large B. Candidates will be making their opening statements in alphabetical order by seat. For mayor, we have Yvette Boudlier, Joseph Spano. City Council at Large A, we have Deb Brinkman, Steve Halfin, Larry Kraft. And for City Council at Large B, we have Joseph Israel and Nadia Muhammad. Tonight's candidate questions include written questions from our live audience. Those viewing this forum on cable TV, Channel 17, may submit your questions via email to jwheeler@stlouispark.org. Written questions from the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park are also included in tonight's forum. We will be using a timekeeper, so everyone has the same amount of time, and the timekeepers are in the front row. We will begin with candidates' opening statements. Statements will be given in alphabetical order and are limited to 2 minutes each. We will be alternating candidates, so each gets to respond first to a question, and each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to the questions. So we'll start with our opening statements, and we will begin with Yvette Baudelaire.
Good evening. I really appreciate that all of you are taking the time to be here today. My opening statement, it's quite simple, and it's related to a story that I will tell you little by little today through the questions and through the statement. As a resident of the city of St. Louis Park, I had experienced firsthand the need of the community to be engaged and to actively participate in all of the fields and all of the realms of the city that constitute what a city of St. Louis Park is. We have multiple communities, we have a diversity, and we have so many different communities that need to be working together for one single goal, which is the benefit and the best interest of our city. It is a challenge, and as part of my background as a professional mediator, one of the things that I really appreciate in life is challenge, because I believe that that's the only way that we can grow and that we can lift our spirits working for a common goal. Working together for the communities that are built in St. Louis Park, it could be a very nice slogan, but if we don't have a strategic plan and an action plan and the conviction and the solid values that could constitute and build what a plan could be, we will just be talking the talk. My proposal for the city of St. Louis Park is precisely to get hands-on, roll up our sleeves, and work on what really is to define the strategies that it will take us to the vision that we are having that is built with our dreams for the city of St. Louis Park. I have encountered.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Our next mayoral candidate, Jake Spano.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the League for putting this on. We always appreciate the opportunity to share our vision with the community. I also want to thank Yvette for running. It takes a lot for all of the candidates, I should say, who are running. It takes a lot to put your name on a ballot. And so I appreciate the fact that they're up here sharing their vision with us. I'm running for mayor. I am currently the mayor of St. Louis Park. I spent 4 years before that on the city council. A lot of people are new to St. Louis Park, and so I have to remind folks a little bit of my background. I worked in the private sector for years and years and years until one day my wife, who's seated here in the front row, Kate McDonald, who's a teacher here, convinced me that I was so miserable at my job, I needed to find something that brought me fulfillment. And it's probably the best thing that ever, maybe next to marrying her, maybe the second best thing that ever happened to me. Because ever since then, for the last 15 years, I have had the great joy and honor of working with a lot of people in a lot of different areas to help build things together. Whether it was working with Senator Klobuchar or working for Mayor Chris Coleman, or in my current job as the Deputy Secretary of State, working with Secretary of State Steve Simon, we get to work together to build things that we can't do on our own. And I think that that's what a community is about. It is about people getting together and talking amongst each other, finding sort of the opportunities and challenges that a community faces, and then tackling them together. We've done a lot of great work over the course of the last 8 years. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But for me, for the next 4 years, I think I'm going to be focused on growing our community, refining the work that we're already engaged in, and trying to reimagine some of the things that we've taken for granted in our community. And I think that this is the sort of place that we can do that work as a city. We've proven that over and over and over again. So I won't belabor it any longer. I'm sure I'm pretty close to my 2 minutes, but I'm really looking forward to tonight, and thank you for everybody for coming out tonight.
Thank you. Candidate for council member at large, A, Deb Brinkman.
Hello, everyone. Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Deb Brinkman. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to the City of St. Louis Park for hosting this candidate forum. This is like a terrific crowd, and I am so excited to be here tonight. I have deep St. Louis Park roots. My family has lived in St. Louis Park for more than 3 generations. I live in the Creekside neighborhood where I raised 2 children who graduated from St. Louis Park High School. My most recent community accomplishments include being the president of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park. I led the effort to pass ranked choice voting. I helped start a scholarship program for St. Louis Park senior high students. I helped start the Kids Vote program where kids can vote, and very similar to their parents in grades 2 through 8. I'm a children's first champion, and I have been an election judge. As a result of this experience, I think my track record proves I can turn opportunity into action. I'm a small business owner and a project manager, and I lead with a collaborative style. The skills I've acquired as a project manager will help me be an effective city council member. I know it's important to seek communication, interaction, and input from St. Louis Park neighbors whenever possible. My priorities as your city council representative include addressing climate action change by improving the environment, promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, smart redevelopment that fits the scale and the value of our communities, and transportation and safer streets. Please vote for me, Deb Brinkman, as your first choice for St. Louis Park City Council at Large A.
Thank you. And Councilmember at Large A, Steve Halfin.
You got it. It's a compound word, Halfin. So, no. Once again, thanks to the League of Women Voters, and what a great turnout. Much appreciated for everybody to fill these seats. It's much better for us to be speaking to somebody as opposed to just people watching on TV. So thanks for coming tonight. My name is Steve Halfin, and I am the at-large A City Council member. I've been humbled twice before by the voters of St. Louis Park to win election to this seat. So many of you already know who I am. But for those of you who don't, who am I? Well, I was born and raised right here in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, 1967. I'm husband of Beth, who graduated from St. Louis Park High School in 1985, father of TJ, who graduated from St. Louis Park High School in 2014. 46-year resident. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I'm a Little League coach. I was also the president of St. Louis Park Little League. I was the Browndale neighborhood president. I've spent 7 years on the St. Louis Park and Rec Commission. I'm also a Children First asset champion. I was one of the first that went through the course to become an asset champion many years ago. And probably of all of the volunteer work that I do, my proudest thing is I'm a board member for the crown jewel of St. Louis Park, the St. Louis Park Emergency Program STEP. So with all of that, I also am on the city council. And I would like to continue to be on the city council and be part of the decision-making process for this city moving forward. Over the past 8 years, there's been a lot of great advancements and help for this city. And as one of our former mayors says, we drink and we drive and we flush, and that's probably the most important thing that we do for the city.
Thank you. And Larry Kraft, council member for at Large A.
All right, so thank you to the League for hosting the event tonight, and thank you to all in the audience and to those watching on TV. My wife Lori and I moved here 16 years ago. We have 2 kids, Jamie, who's 14 at the high school, and Jason, who's 12 at the middle school. I've been actively involved in the community. I've been a Little League coach for years. I've coached basketball. I'm on the Environment and Sustainability Commission, and I was actively involved in the drafting of our climate action plan. I spent 25 years in the high-tech industry. I was recruited here to run sales and marketing for a mid-sized company. Through that process, I've run a budget the size of the city's. But 6 years ago, I decided to leave the corporate world because I was deeply concerned about my kids' future around climate change. So for most of the past 5 years, up until a few months ago, I was running a small national nonprofit called iMatter that works with high school students that care about the climate crisis and want to get locally involved. So my kids and youth in general are a key part of why I'm here and why I'm running. I'm going to tell you an example. So about 4 years ago, I started mentoring the high school Roots and Shoots Environmental Club. Students there came before council in early 2016 and asked them to take action on climate change. Council listened and adopted our climate action plan. That was adopted last year. It's actually the best plan in Minnesota and one of the most aggressive in the country. So I'm running because that plan is a broad framework, but it is a tremendous opportunity to fill in the details, to do it right here, to make our community happier, healthier, more equitable, and more sustainable for the long term, and be a model for others. Now, I view climate change and climate policy as touching virtually every area of government, and I'm excited to talk about a lot of those here with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate for council member at Large B, Joseph Israel.
Hello, thank you for inviting us. And like everyone here on this table, everyone is rearing to go, bushy-eyed and puffy tails, I guess is what we can call it. My name is Joseph Israel, and I was born in Egypt. I'll give you 2 seconds, because sometimes people ask me a lot more about that. But that takes more than the 2 minutes that I'm allotted. I'd like to think that, I am a retired engineer, nearly 40 years, and I've worked on many large projects, stood in front of very surly boards to sell some ideas, and basically initiate projects in the millions of dollars in the States as well as overseas. I'd like to think that I can bring to the City Council some maturity and maybe some weighted thought process, if you will. I feel the city is running a race, but I'm not so sure with whom and against what. You know, there's so many things happening, and sometimes this is disrupting to some of the citizens. So we'd like to bring some balance and some, again, I use the word maturity. I can say that. I have a lot of gray hair. And at the same time, I'd like to say that the next element in my agenda is what's called as wise budgeting. I'd like to see the taxes levied on the residents to be, instead of the 5 to 6% every year, which everyone says, well, it's only 50, 60 bucks a year. But if you add it up over 5 to 10 years and it accrues, it becomes a bit unwieldy for some of us, especially what I would call some of us who are on, you know, fixed income. Oh, thank you. You want me to stop right there?
Thank you, Joseph.
All right, thank you.
And our final candidate for Council Member at Large B, Nadia Mohammed.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys all for coming. Thank you as well to the League of Women for hosting this. My name is Nadia Mohammed. I am a new American. My family and I moved here when I was 10 years old. I lived in a couple of neighborhoods. I lived in the Louisiana Court neighborhood, Oak Park Village, and now I live in the Cobble Crest neighborhood. I am a benefactor of programs such as STEP, Perspectives, and I'm also a park grad. For the past 4 years, I've been involved in community engagement as a volunteer for the city's Multicultural Advisory Committee. And due to those efforts, I was awarded the 2018 Human Rights Award. I am running because I believe the city officials should better reflect the changing demographics of the city. I also believe that I'll bring a fresh perspective as well as a fresh voice to the city. I am running on 4 main priorities. My first is youth engagement. Youth are having a lot of hardship after high school and need mentorship as they go into their colleges, their communities, into their workplaces. My second is diversity and inclusion. We are not short on diversity in St. Louis Park. And it's about how we figure out how do we incorporate those different voices into all decision-making levels of the city. My third is climate action. The city is already addressing this in their climate action plan and need to start investing in solutions that better, that help us face the problems that we are having today. My last is affordable housing. The city investments are needed not to only develop, but as well as preserve affordable housing. If I'm so lucky to be elected as your next city official member, I will make it my mission to build a city that works for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And now you will have 1.5 minutes to respond to the questions that I'm going to ask. And the first question, Mr. Spano will be the first person to answer. What is your primary issue to motivate you to run?
It's always a challenging question. I think that I hate to pick one, but you've asked me to just select one. So I'm going to say that the fact that 1/6 of the United States population spends half of their monthly income on housing, that's almost 20% of the people who live in this country. And I want everyone in this room to think about what you make in a month and imagine if you spent half of that on your housing. Everybody in this community deserves a bed to lay their head on every single night. And it is not just a matter of having a safe place and a warm bed. It impacts our schools. I hear it from my wife. Kids who are couch hopping at the high school, we hear about this frequently. I think the superintendent is here. It's a major issue that we have to face. And so we have taken some steps, as Nadia mentioned. We passed in some inclusionary affordable housing policies. What I'm really excited about is we've added a 30%, what we call 30% AMI policy, which gets to those who are the poorest in our community. Because as we're growing and we're building all of these phenomenal facilities and new apartments and new housing is coming into our community, that's great. But we're working very, very hard to make sure that regular everyday folks in St. Louis Park and the poorest of our community can afford to live in those places.
Thank you. Ms. Brinkman.
Thank you. I think probably one, I know, I didn't decide to run for city council because I had one issue that I thought was terrible. I want to run for St. Louis Park to be a representative for all of you. As I've been out door knocking, I've talked to a lot of people. One of the things I've heard most frequently is that they're concerned about street safety. And so they say cars are going too fast and they're not stopping at stop signs. And so I know that the state recently passed some legislation that will allow us more control over our speed limit. So that's going to be one of the things that I'd like to take a look at. Of course, there's many other opportunities that we have to improve life here in St. Louis Park, including the light rail and some of the redevelopment efforts that we have going on there. And then addressing a climate action change. I think this is an opportunity to bring some great technology that we can all take advantage of. And then promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. As I mentioned, I lead with a collaborative style. So I am looking forward to being able to get more people engaged and more people involved, and just for things like this.
Thank you. Mr. Halfin.
Thank you. One thing that made me want to run for office. Actually, the answer for me is pretty simple. It's the same reason today as it was 8 years ago when I ran. It's really love of city. Growing up in St. Louis Park, it's such a great place to grow up. And actually, I got to add a adverb. Growing up Jewish in St. Louis Park in the 70s and 80s was a different thing. It's a different city now, and I love this city. But that's the reason. There's just something about, I had to move away when I was in 9th grade and go to another high school. I graduated high school, and guess where I moved right back to? I moved back to St. Louis Park. I went in the military, I went to the Army. I went to school in Mankato. Where did I come back to? I came back to St. Louis Park. So all of the issues that are going on in St. Louis Park, I'm sure we're gonna get into some much more meaty issues, but the simple answer to your question, why? It's love of city. And I wanna be part of the decision-making process for this city that I love moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Kraft.
So, as I said in my intro, my primary motivation in doing this is climate change and the work. I think we can do something really big and special and profound for our community locally and to be an example for others. But I also want to take this time to say how I think climate impacts multiple other issues, and I want to give some examples. So affordable housing is one. Low-income individuals spend on average over 7% of their annual incomes on utilities. Naturally occurring affordable housing tends to be less energy efficient. So there's an opportunity to simultaneously re-insulate, do right by the environment, and lower the cost of housing. So development, right? So you think about, it's a really challenging issue, but one of the things here that we're trying to do as we develop is we want to make sure there are places and homes for people as they either downsize or need to upsize, right? And you don't want them to have to actually go and buy places or move out further out away from the city. That is sprawl, and that's not good for the environment as well. Last one, stormwater management. So this is an adaptation issue. We've had one of the wettest weathers we've ever had here, and we're now having flooding issues out at the new PSI where the kids haven't been able to use their playgrounds for so far. And so that's because we have to think about those kind of infrastructure issues more and more as the climate changes. So again, You know, it's obvious what my number one issue is, but we can do something really unique and special here.
Thank you.
Can I interrupt 1 second? Yvette did not get to answer.
Right,
the
she,
question.
she's last in this round.
Oh, she is, oh, okay.
Yes. Mr. Israel,
Okay. Well, I moved to the city about 17 years ago. I came for a job. Actually, I came kicking and screaming. I said, what the heck, I'm going to come to a cold place as Minneapolis. And I tell you, I still have to reconcile that every winter with my wife. Nonetheless, I think we fell in love with the city here. All my children live nearby, and they all love it. So again, it's love for city, why I'm running. Second reason is over the last few years, you know, taxes have been going higher and higher. And I am concerned about that because we talk about affordable housing, yet we forget those citizens and those residents who have actually built the city of St. Louis Park. So we have to make it affordable for them as well. And I'm not talking only about the those that are on fixed income, but I'm talking about those that, in other words, middle-class people, working people, who an increase of a few $100s a year makes a big difference for them. So this is what I'm running for those individuals and to make it equitable for everyone.
thank you. Ms. Mohammed,
So I am running for a lot of reasons, and it's not, I can't put it all in 1 minute. So, but I'll try my best. Like I said, the city has put a lot of resources into me, and I've listed them all. And as cliche as it sounds, is to give back to the community and to really make sure that I am paying it back. So, and another one big reason why I'm running is youth engagement. Youth are having a hard time after high school and need mentorship. So sometimes they're not so lucky to have parents to guide them through that process. So when they go into their colleges, their communities, their workplaces, they're doing it so often they are the first to get to go to college in their families, the first to get mortgages in their families, and the first to go through the process. So what I'm saying is if we provide the mentorship, they will have somebody to guide them through the process, and they won't be too busy fighting or trying to survive the system to participate anything outside of it. So, thank you.
thank you. Ms. Moulier,
Thank you. I think I have to agree with the rest of the panel here today that there is more than one reason why we all are running. But I think in my case, I am a commissioner of the Human Rights and the Commission of Human Rights for the city of St. Louis Park already. And what had motivated me to do that and what motivates me to run as a mayor for the city, it's a deep conviction. And what do I mean by that? I was born in Mexico City. After I graduated from college, I moved to France, and from France to Spain. From Spain, I moved here in 2003. So I am an immigrant of this country, but I have come to respect and to love the city of St. Louis Park. And from that feeling, I went to the thought of that the city of St. Louis Park, if we are able to comprise it in a very reduced, without any more definitions, has a lot of resources and has a lot of needs. So my mission as elected mayor of the city of St. Louis Park is to establish an equation where resources are connected to needs and a planification that is strategic, that it could serve the best interest of the community and the communities inside of the city of St. Louis Park.
thank you. And the first person to answer this next question is Ms. Brinkman. Explain how you will support and defend Resolution 16166, which affirms the city's commitment to human rights for all, including Muslims and immigrants, and affirms the city's commitment to reject division, bigotry, hate, and fear.
Thank you. How much time would I get? No, I'm just kidding. This is a huge issue, right? I mean, it's nationwide, but I just love St. Louis Park, and I think we do a great job at working with all of our neighbors and getting out and getting to know them. I work with a lot of people from different countries at work, and what I found to be the best way to start bonding with other people from other cultures is by celebrating holidays, because that is a joyous time where everybody kind of gets together. And I find that we all have the same values. So I think that it's very important that we recognize and treasure those values. And that makes it so much easier for us then to accept, appreciate, and celebrate the cultural challenges or the cultural differences that other people bring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Halfin.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to repeat that question
Sure.
because it was a little, please.
Yes. Explain how you will support and defend Resolution 16166, which affirms the city's commitment to human rights for all, including Muslims and immigrants, and affirms the city's commitment to reject division, bigotry, hate, and fear.
Thank you. So already doing that, by the way, because that is on our books as a ordinance, as a city council member, I try and do my best to follow every ordinance that we have on the books. And by being on the city council and working with our city staff to make sure that the human rights of all and the dignity of all are held, very high. We I guess that's not even the right word. Over the past handful of years, we as a city have started race, equity, and inclusion, which is one of our 5 strategic priorities. But not only have we done that, we have put every director from the city through this training and all of city staff through this training. It's very important, as you're noticing, the city staff around here, if you come into this building, it's not everybody that looks like me. It's not a bunch of white men anymore. We've made a conscious effort to make sure that the employees of this city look like the community that we're serving. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kraft.
Yeah, I want to start by honoring the mayor, Councilmember Halfin, and the other council members for adopting that policy first. So kudos there. I think on these kind of things, there's some parts of it that are simple. One is when you hear it, you have to stand up and reject it, whether you hear it publicly or privately. And I think that's really important. The other thing is, I think we need to engage. And so what I've always found the best way to engage and bring people in is to have a real conversation and listen. And listen with the intent to understand, the intent to be moved, and the intent to take action. So simple, but that's how I would approach it. You must reject it and publicly do so when you hear it, and then really engage people.
Thank you. Mr. Israel.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Explain how you will support and defend Resolution 16166, which affirms the city's commitment to human rights for all, and affirms the city's commitment to reject division, which includes bigotry, hate, and fear.
That's one of the reasons I still live in St. Louis Park 17 years, because I found it to be a very welcoming city along every avenue, every street I have been in. Of course I support that. I'm an immigrant myself. I was a minority. Some instances I still am a minority. I haven't lost my accent completely, but some people find it charming. So I think with that, that's my question. And if I have time left, can I get it credit for the next question?
I don't think so, but nice try.
Tried.
Ms. Mohammed?
So, how do I support that? I think I genuinely believe that we are stronger together and that weakness comes from division. And that's what America was built on, you know, coming together and really holding our values. As part of my platform, it is diversity inclusion. And diversity isn't just the color of your skin or the religion you're practicing. It is your socioeconomic background. It is the life that you've lived, the experiences that you come into. And we want to make sure that we are incorporating those into our neighborhood associations, into our city staff, city officials, everywhere that we can in the city, so that that is how we show that we are an inclusive community, that we care for one another, that we take care of one another. And as a woman of color who is a practicing Muslim, who is a young adult, who is starting out life, I think there's like a lot of things that I see and I bring, or the perspective that I bring. I think it'll be great to go forward with that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Baudelaire?
You got it right this time. Thank you. Well, this question really pulls one of the deepest strings in my heart and in my soul. Why? When I lived in France, I graduated. I did a fellowship in human rights by the Institute of René Casson, which is a Nobel Prize. Which that tells you is that human rights is my passion. And the question is quite complex, and we probably could have spent a workshop of a week trying to understand it and see the many faces of it. But when situations like this happened, I remember my professor, when I was doing my master's degree, said, listen, when you are facing a bigger problem, apply common sense, which means human rights. It's compounded by humans and rights. We as humans have the right to be humans, to exist. And of course, I believe that anybody in this room and everybody even outside of this room will always be in pro our defending our own existence and defining what is the shape, the color, the smell, the aroma, and the path that we are taking as humans, regardless of either if we are Jewish, Muslim, Christians, atheists. That's our right to exist as humans, and that's what human rights is about. It's precisely a comprehensive, summary and body of what makes us the humanity, and we have the responsibility with each other.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Spano?
Thank you for the question. I'm reminded 8 years ago when I got onto the city council, I was 2 months into my term. And I brought forward to my colleagues, at that time, those of you who were from here or were here in 2012 will remember, that is when there was a movement to put a constitutional amendment on the banning the marriage of gay couples in the state of Minnesota. And I brought forward to the council a resolution opposing that. And I'd never done anything really on the council before. This was like the first thing, and I was kind of nervous. And it passed. And I remember that summer, a couple walking up to me, and I introduced myself and gave them my card. And I said, well, you're new to town, and if you have any issues or concerns, let me know. And she and her husband said, were you involved in that passage of that resolution opposing same-sex marriage? And I thought to myself, okay, well, here we go. This is what they told you is going to happen. Somebody's going to be upset with you. And she said, this mother said, when David and I were trying to find a place to raise our family, we had a lot of choices. We'd heard good things about St. Louis Park, but we weren't really sure. We watched you guys pass that, and David turned to me and he said, honey, we picked the right place to raise our family. And to this day, it gets me a little, worked up. Because it was just it was a symbol not so much of what I had done, but what this community's values are. And as I've worked through the council and over the course of the last 4 years especially, I am now the co-chair of the National League of Cities Race Equity and Leadership Initiative, which I'm excited to be a part of and want to continue bringing that work back here to St. Louis Park. So there's a lot to this. I see my time's up.
Thank you. And with the next question, we'll start with Mr. Halfin. What are your views about the recent city council action to tax homeowners at a higher rate while lowering the taxable rate for businesses?
Okay, so not sure where that question's coming from, so I'm not here to give a civics lesson, but the taxes are based on all of the property in the city of St. Louis Park that our assessors go out and have to assess. So some years, the business or the buildings that the businesses are in, those values raise higher than the homeowners some years. If the questioner is correct, and I don't know that they are, but if the questioner is correct, what that means is that this year, it happened where the businesses had more than the homeowners in the assessment on their houses and their businesses. So it's kind of a every other year thing, not necessarily every other year. So I don't necessarily agree with the premise of the question is where I'll go. I will say this though, that last year condominium owners saw a big jump in their taxes compared to regular homeowners. It's because those multifamily condominiums the values of those homes happen to raise more than the values of the houses. So it's a year-to-year deal, and it's not always going to be that way.
Thank you. Mr. Kraft?
Yeah, so thanks to Steve for giving the lesson there. I have to use my time to do that. So actually on this, I don't know that's accurate or not, but I think it may be getting to just the underlying issue of taxes and increase. And it's actually something that, having run a decent sized budget, it's something that I am, want to pay attention to. I would generally be more interested in seeing levy raises around the 2 to 3% around the rate of inflation. I'm also interested in things like outcome-based budgeting, where if you are going to raise beyond that 2 to 3%, that it's clear what you're getting out of that. But in general, it seems like St. Louis Park does a really good job of managing the city and making an effective use of tax dollars. So I'll lay those out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Israel?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. What are your views about the recent city council action to tax homeowners at a higher rate while lowering the taxable rate for businesses?
Outraged. Whether it's true or not, just the fact that it was mentioned means someone feels that they have been somewhat not treated equally as the rest. I think the businesses should pay a fairer share because they simply enjoy profits in the city as well as having people actually go and frequent the businesses that they do. Of course, it has to be also with moderation. You can't be punitive. You have to be equitable. I'll stop and...
Thank you.
Did I go beyond my... oh, okay. Thank you. I'd like to buy those few seconds, if I may.
Ms. Mohammed?
You're a funny guy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think taxes are how the city pays for the services that they provide, which St. Louis Park provides great services. But we also want to be careful with our tax dollars, making sure that we are prioritizing what we need rather than what we want. So that people aren't getting taxed out of their homes and taxed out of the cities. We have to take into consideration like the senior citizens with limited income, low-income families, really anybody who wants to live in St. Louis Park and can't go higher than the current taxes. Really keeping those people in mind would be one big thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Baudelaire?
Thank you. We'll try next time. Well, I believe that in the next Thanksgiving dinner, we all should ban three conversations, three topics, which are football, politics, and taxes, because those are always tricky questions. The truth of the matter for me is that I believe and I am convinced that taxes are the pot of resources and funds that we can utilize in order to meet all the services and the needs that the city has. The issue in this question is that what are the priorities that we are establishing in opposition to the needs that we have in the city? So that's a revision that we have to do first before we establish as a specific index. Now, there is always the dilemma. Are we going to decrease taxes for businesses so we incentivize our local economy? Well, there are also ways to incentivize our local economy without putting up or putting down the taxes. And at the same time, are we going to tax homeowners even more because they have the ability to own a house? Well, we have to consider one thing also, the people who rent units and residents in the city of San Luis Park, they also pay taxes. So they're also very similar in comparison.
Thank you. Mr. Spano?
Yeah, this is always, the budget and how we spend money is always an issue, and I think Steve tried to do a decent job. It is a very complicated formula, but it's not just about the percentage of what we charge in taxes, it's also about property values, and I think that's the piece that Steve was getting at. Certain properties appreciate in the market faster than others. So sometimes we'll see, tax increases on small homes go up faster than with big homes, and you sort of say, I don't understand why, and it turns out that's the way the market sort of works. That having been said, St. Louis Park's average tax levy over the course of the last 10 years is 4.57%. It puts us squarely in the middle of every other similarly disposed city, cities like Roseville or and around us. There are cities around us, just to the west of us, where they have a 12% levy this year. There are cities like Falcon Heights that have a 50% levy increase this year. And so when you're looking at this, some of it is a number, some of it is how you manage that money. And so I think that what we should be focused on is making sure that we are providing a good value to our residents for the money that we take from them. And there are two other things that I just want to raise as long as I have the opportunity. I absolutely agree that property taxpayers in the city, whether you're a business or a resident, you are the ones that fund city government. Full stop. I think it's time for us to look at things like a local option sales tax, which would capture revenue from people who come into our community every day, and that would help alleviate some of the burden on local property taxes.
Thank you. And Ms. Brinkman?
Thank you. So my understanding as well is that the property taxes are based on assessment, and the calculation is complicated. I believe that the question is referring to the percentage that we're paying in taxes. I've spent the summer meeting neighbors, and I know that there are many people that are not comfortable with the percentage that the taxes are going up, and they're really worried about, in particular, they're worried about the people that are on fixed incomes. So I know that that is a real concern, and it's very real. I know, too, that if we keep our tax base at minimum, whatever the inflation is, it's not going to be really enough for us to invest in our future, and we won't be able to maintain our infrastructure. So that is a very important balance. If we need to cut something, we would really want to look at what services we have that we decide that we don't want to fund any longer. And then also, I just want to say that to help keep our budget, or to help manage our budget, I do obviously believe in responsible spending, and I would want to make sure that the spending that we do is directly related to our vision statement.
Thank you.
Plan.
The next question will start with Mr. Kraft. How do you feel about the Southwest Light Rail?
So I'm a supporter of Southwest Light Rail, and I'm excited about the opportunities that it brings to the community. You know, both from a connectivity perspective as well as from the development that we get to do around that. I think that raises some concerns sometimes and some challenges I've heard from people while door knocking about the level of traffic that may be brought in and how it might change characters of communities. So I think we need to do that carefully and thoughtfully. But I'm excited about the opportunity of being able to connect people more easily with downtown, the job creation opportunities that it provides around these light rail stations. And also, one of the things that I'm really interested in pursuing is how we connect into those light rail stations to make it easy for folks in other parts of the community that aren't maybe within walking distance to connect in with them. So overall, though, really excited to see what light rail will bring for us.
Thank you. Mr. Israel?
I still haven't made up my mind about the light rail. I've lived in big cities like New York City. I've also Paris, France. And there, of course, you need something to move people to different places. I just wonder how much a change of a character in St. Louis Park it will bring. It's good and bad, and I'm not quite sure whether I would lean on one side or the other. So I'm a wait-and-see kind of guy.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mohammed?
I am a big supporter of the Southwest Light Rail. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for the city. It's going to offer a lot of equitable transportation to people to get to downtown or anywhere else. It is also going to be, I know it's going to be amazing, but we also want to be careful around the housing there and making sure that those 3 hubs or the 3 stations, which I'm excited about, but those 3 stations aren't gentrified, and that we are careful about the housing that we put there, whether that is townhouses, apartments, or even single-family homes, and making sure that we're planning ahead for it. Those 3 hubs are going to be really big, especially for low-income families. It's going to be it is going to be big for everybody. And we just have to be intentional about how we plan for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Boudelaire?
Thank you. I own my own consultant as a family and civil law mediator. I've been doing this for 10 years. And I am over 40 years old. So I have two skills that can apply to this response that I've been asked. First of all, I don't see life as black and white. And as a mediator, I have the ability, because of the training I've been getting and the experience, to see things in the middle ground. What is this supposed to mean for me and for this question? This project of the Southwest Rail, you cannot impede the growth of a city in one hand. And on the other hand, you cannot have wasteful use of your taxes. And any decision that you take for the city as a team has to consider not only that it's going to look pretty, but it's really going to function. Because if we make a decision that does not work, we will not have sustainability. And sustainability, excuse me, it does not precisely have only to do with environment. Sustainability is that if my decision that I'm going to take today is going to take me in 10 years to the moment of satisfaction that what I did, it worked for the city and for the residents. So in other words, I will do a revision of this.
Okay.
You will continue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Spano?
Well, this is the reason that I ran 8 years ago. At the time I was working, I just finished working for Senator Klobuchar, and I had worked on her transit and transportation stuff, and I sort of thought I might have some skills that I could apply to a practical problem. And so I will be very clear and unabashed about the fact that I am thrilled about this opportunity for us. I think that it is the sort of project that is going to ensure that St. Louis Park is economically and culturally relevant for the next century. And I don't think that that's hyperbole. I think that's a very serious statement. I think when I used to work in Mayor Chris Coleman's office, you saw what the Green Line did to St. Paul. $18 billion worth of private investment on the Green Line. That money was not, my wife and I used to live in the Midway in St. Paul. That money didn't get invested before light rail was there. So I think there's a great return on investment. Representative Cheryl Joachim is in the audience here, and I'm looking at her because she and I were shoulder to shoulder working on that project for so many years, and we're very, very fortunate to have her at the legislature working on these issues. And the other thing that she'll remember that I'm excited about is as part of this negotiation of bringing this project into our community, I was able to negotiate for grade separations at the trail crossings at the Wooddale station and at the Beltline station. So you're seeing now a bridge that's being built over the Beltline road, and we're gonna have an underpass at Wooddale. Those weren't part of the project until I managed to work with Representative Joachim to get those in there. The last two pieces I would say is it is important and vital to our climate action plan, and it provides access to people to tens of thousands of jobs along the Green Line. So it's hugely important, and I'm a big supporter.
Thank you. Ms. Brinkman.
Thank you. I am a big fan of the light rail, and I know from meeting with neighbors all summer that many of you are as well. A ton of people are really excited about the light rail. I've been excited to see the development in St. Paul, and it's really revitalized a lot of neighborhoods. I think it fits very nicely into our climate action plan. It will get fewer cars on the street, so the streets will be safer. And I think that there's opportunities for development around the stations for maybe some small businesses, which I think will be a good enhancement to St. Louis Park as well. Somewhere where you can just stop and get maybe a carton of milk or an ice cream cone, whatever that you feel that you want to have while you're waiting for the train. And then I also think that it's important that we look for options of transportation within St. Louis Park so that we can get to the light rail easily. It's not going to be a lot of fun if it's snowing and we've got 2 armfuls of groceries and then you've got to walk, 10 blocks. So I hope that I'll be able to look for transportation options to get to the light rail if I'm elected to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman.
Thanks. So I initially just had a one-word answer. What do I think of I'm excited about it, is what I am. In the first, I would say, 2 to 3 years of being elected to the city council, it was probably 75% of the work that this council did. It was on our agenda almost every single time we met in this building. And a lot of you, not only watching on TV, but are here in the audience, pushed us to make sure that the freight rail did not come through this city. And I give credit to Mayor Spano and Representative Joachim, who's here, to make sure that we did not get saddled with the freight rail coming right through the middle of the city. That was the battlegrounds. On the flip side of that is we were all excited about the light rail coming, because we knew what kind of economic development that's going to bring to our city. And we weren't thinking about it at the time, but it fits right into the climate action plan that we as a council passed, just recently. So I'll finish with the way I started. I'm excited.
Sounds good. Thank you. This is our final question from the audience. Do you feel neighborhood associations should have more input in participating in city government? And we'll start with Mr. Israel.
One word answer. I keep leaving a lot of my seconds to others. My is yes, but I also would like to see more participation from the city as a whole. And that is, I think 2011, and I learned that from attending some of the city council meetings. That was the last city survey that was done. So we're talking about 8 years in between. We haven't heard from our residents and our citizens in 8 years. I'd like to say that annually we should do something like that. So not only the neighborhood captains or captainettes, if you will, but also from the city as a whole. We need to understand from them what do they feel about the city, about the neighborhood, and the interaction between these individuals and these groups with the city council. City council needs to learn more about what's going on.
Thank you. Ms. Mohammed?
To answer that question, yes. Neighborhood associations do, it's the most efficient way, well, one of the most efficient ways that city officials know what's going on in neighborhoods. But I want to take that a step further. I really, as part of my diversity and inclusion, I really want to make sure that even the neighborhood associations are tapping into the diverse communities, making sure that they're getting the input. And one of the ways that we can do this is like when we're implementing affordable housing, we need to make sure that it's mixed income neighborhoods so that everybody gets a voice, and that voice is then taken to city officials, making sure that whatever policies that they come out of better reflects the city as a whole. So yes, I definitely would say so. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Boudelaire?
I can answer with 5 seconds or 3 hours. But let's see. One of the equations that defines what a community is and what sum of communities that built a city is the engagement and the participation. The less participation you have, either from the neighborhoods, from the associations, from et cetera, the less that community is strong. We want a strong community, we need to have participation, and we need to have collaboration. And what is that supposed to mean? What that means to me when I am at home and I'm tired from a day of work? Well, it means that either I have to vote, I will exercise my right to vote, I will teach my children to participate by not even littering in the streets when we walk, but at the same time, it will be me reaching out to those associations that have a specific mission and a specific purpose for people, to get my time donated to that. So absolutely is the way we can build a city, is the way we can build a community or several communities within the city. And if you see in my distribution of literature that I have had, that's precisely the bottom line of me, that I envision a city that is functioning, that is high functioning.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Spano?
Thank you for the question. I was my neighborhood association, whatever title. I think every neighborhood has a different title for it, but like leader, whatever you want for my neighborhood, which is Brooklawns, when my wife and I moved here years ago. And so I have a pretty unique perspective, firsthand perspective into that. The neighborhood association system was something that was created by our former mayor, Gail Dorfman, and I point to it frequently as being one of the best sort of building blocks in any community that I've ever experienced in talking with other mayors. I've worked in St. Paul where people are fiercely proud of their neighborhoods, but in St. Louis Park, people not only know what neighborhood they live in, they know the names of all the neighborhoods around them, right? And I always think that that's funny when I go into a neighborhood, or I'm talking to somebody and they say, well, I'm from Creekside. Okay, well, who's directly to your east? Well, that's Brookside, yeah, of course. So people are fiercely proud of them. So far, they have always kind of operated on their own. Everybody just kind of does their own thing. I do think that the neighborhood association system needs to be reimagined. It's actually one of the things on my campaign literature. But I also think that that means that our neighborhood associations have changes they need to make. Namely, our neighborhood associations need to become more diverse and represent the breadth of the community that lives in those neighborhoods. And I'm specifically talking about people of color and indigenous people. When I meet with the neighborhood association leaders group 3 years ago, I specifically called that out and I said, some of you are going to need to step aside to bring new leadership into this community that better represents all of the people who live here. So yes, I'm very excited to see what the neighborhoods can do. I think they've got work to do as well.
Thank you. Ms. Brinkman?
Yes, I definitely believe that our neighborhoods associations can be more engaged in our city. I think, as I mentioned, I'm a collaborative person, and so I think that it is important when we all work together, I think we're stronger. And I think that as a city council, I think we'll have an opportunity to be more intentional about reaching out to those neighborhood associations and making sure that we hear from everybody, you know, not people that are just the boldest and the loudest, but I think we really need to be intentional about reaching out to others that may not be comfortable, you know, coming into a big group or standing at the podium addressing the council. So I think we have a lot of opportunities and a lot of, well, I know that I have been richly rewarded by getting to know so many people as I've been out meeting people this summer. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Halfin.
Thanks. Just a quick repeat of the question.
Sure. Do you feel neighborhood associations should have more input and participation in city government?
Okay, that's what I thought. I was just gonna start expounding about how great I thought all the neighborhood associations are, but I wanted to answer the question a little bit. I honestly believe that they do. The city, we have an annual meeting every year where all of neighborhood leadership is invited to that meeting, and council is there, and we also do another annual meeting with all of our boards and commissions. So we try and make sure as a council that we are working with those neighborhood associations, and they have direct contact with not only city staff, but with council. So I love the fact that we have neighborhoods. When I grew up, I was technically in the Minnetonka Vista neighborhood, although Browndale Park was my park, because I was kind of right on the border. And then I ended up living in Browndale. So shout out to Browndale, anybody. We were just over the weekend at the Bluegrass and the Bluegrass Bonfire event that they've had every year for 20 plus years. And one of my neighbors, Betty Carl, was the very first president of the Browndale Neighborhood Association. Browndale is unique. And I'm proud to be an alumni of Browndale because they've had a different president or chair every single year since they've started, which is a difficult thing to do, but what it does is it brings in a lot of new people and a lot of new ideas. So we have strong neighborhoods, and we definitely need to lean on them for ideas to help the city out. And aside from the Bluegrass and Bonfire, also a shout out to Crestview. I love their summer picnic.
Thank you. Mr. Kraft.
Yeah, so I have a soft spot in my heart of the past 5 years for grassroots organizing, as that's what I've been coaching young people on. So I love the neighborhood associations. That's, you know, about as close as you can get to, you know, the lowest level of democracy. So I will say some things that Nadia and Jake said really resonated with me as well. You know, this intersection of neighborhood associations and the racial equity and inclusion focus of the city, I think, is really important. And I had a wonderful meeting with the Birchwood Neighborhood Association a couple weeks ago, where they're really thinking about this and trying to think about how to you know, do this. So I think some of the questions to ask in that are, like, who's not participating, why, and understanding what would motivate them to participate. What's their issue? Because when someone has an issue, right, that they care about, such as the folks on Wooddale with bike lanes, they get involved, right? And so I think those kinds of conversations are really important. But I think it's really important to do that because to continue to focus on the racial equity inclusion. Diversity is something that attracted my wife and I here when we moved here. So I think that's a key thing to continue the focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll begin our closing comments. And we're going to do reverse order of the way we started. So Ms. Muhammad, you'll be first.
Since we're giving out shout outs to neighborhoods, I should give a shout out to mine too. Culver Crust, if you're out there, anybody? There you go. Nobody? What? There you go. All right, there we go. I'm glad you guys are, okay. So like I said, I really want to build a city that works for all of us. That means being fiscally responsible, being inclusive, and planning ahead, and being intentional about everything that we do. As I've been like door knocking, going around and door knocking, I've been hearing from you guys, and that is only the beginning. There's more to do. There's a lot more to do. I know we are at a good place. St. Louis Park is hands down the best place, and I'm biased, so that's fine. But there's a lot more to do, and there's a lot more that we can do. So if you have any questions, anything that you want to ask, I am right here. I'll be here until the end of the night. There's my literatures outside too. And you can look me up on my website, nadia4slp.org. Yeah. And wait, come November 5th, vote for Nadia. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Israel.
Yes. Closing is so hard to do, you know. I've been having so much fun talking to you all. I'd like this to continue on for a bit longer, actually until the allotted time, 9 p.m. I can talk between now and 9 if you let me. I really appreciate everyone's attention being here. Some of the questions were actually marvelous questions. No doubt in my mind that there are some more, and I'd like to hear those questions. I'm a good listener, by the way. That's what my granddaughter says. I not only speak with an accent, but I listen with an accent. So I can listen in many languages. So for those of you who would like to speak to me in several of them, I'll be happy to listen to you. And those are English, it's not my first language, by the way, French, Arabic, Spanish, Portuguese. I have 30 seconds. I bought so many seconds earlier. And I sold them to Mr. Spano. A lot of them went to Mr. Spano. So I'd like to impose for another few seconds. I'd like to think that I can bring some maturity, a good sense of balance, a lot of affection and love to all the citizens of St. Louis Park, because I do have that affection and love for the citizens of St. Louis Park. So, come November 5th, as we say, vote for me.
Thank you. Mr. Kraft.
So thank you. So the biggest question that I get asked around climate change is, what can I do as an individual about it? Well, I think our climate action plan provides a guide for what our community can do and how we can be a model for others. Now, I say model, and the reason I do is because I've seen it happen. When those students from the Roots and Shoots Club went to City Council, it caused a significant ripple effect around Minnesota and the country. Just about a month ago, Minnetonka appropriated $100,000 to create their own climate action plan and an environmental commission. And the movement that got them to do it was led by a high school student that was inspired by what happened here. So I've seen hundreds of cities around the country through my work with iMatter, and I want to take the skills I've acquired, the relationships I've made, and apply them here in St. Louis Park. Do we have a minute and a half or 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought it was a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
Okay.
I still have about 20 seconds to go.
So through this view of access to hundreds of cities, I've learned even more how special a place St. Louis Park is. Some may ask, so I would say, that has given me the passion to attack all issues here, including a lot of things that I've heard from people at the doors, like public safety, speed on local streets, racial equity and inclusion, how we develop, especially as light rail comes through, and the level of property taxes. Now, some may ask, can we really have a big impact here? Should we have such a bold vision? And I want to quote former Mayor Jeff Jacobs, who many have heard say, cities exist so people can drink, drive, and flush. Well, back in 2012, he stood up for another issue around the state was having on marriage equality and said, and I think this applies now, but if not us, who? And if not now, when? And I think that applies to climate change as well. So I ask for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Halfin.
Thanks. Well, once again, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters. Thank you. For this great forum, all of the beautiful exchange of ideas, the questions that come from everybody. So I've got a question for you, the audience. Do you like the way the city is being run? And if so, I've been pleased to be a part of that the last 8 years. Like I said, I've been humbled enough to receive many of your votes over the past 2 election cycles, and I'm asking for your vote a third time. I've received the endorsement of our sitting Senator Ron Latz. I've received the endorsement of one of our sitting representatives, Ryan Winkler. Like Nadia, I think St. Louis Park is the best. And I would like to continue to be part of that decision-making process moving forward to keep it the best. I'm extremely available. Anybody of you who has contacted me and wanted to sit down and talk over the past 8 years, I'll meet you anywhere in St. Louis Park for a cup of coffee. Honey and Rye most recently has been the spot, but there's many others. Anybody wants to go sit down and have a beer, my preference is Bunny's, but I will meet you anywhere else that offers those adult beverages. Reflecting on everything that's been going on up here, we've got a lot of great choices for office, and I think that that's another reason why St. Louis Park is great. We've got people sitting up at this dais right now that want to give back to the city that we live in, and I just appreciate, the civil discourse that we're having up here, and I think everybody will be well served regardless of who wins. But having said all that, I would like to be your first choice. So please vote for Steve Halfin on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brinkman.
Thank you. Thanks again to the League of Women Voters and to all of you for doing your research and learning about all the candidates. A special thank you to everyone who supported my campaign, encouraging me to run, displaying yard signs, helping with connections, helping with donations, and writing letters. From the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate it. As you heard from my answers, I'm passionate about the environment, diversity, equity, inclusion, smart redevelopment, transportation, and safer streets. As Secretary of State Steve Simon says, elections matter. I would add that you matter. I'm here because of you. I'm inspired by you. I'm here because I love St. Louis Park. Together, we'll strengthen our community for future generations. To learn more about me, visit my website, www.debbrinkman.org. Please vote for me, Deb Brinkman, as your first choice for City Council at-large A on November 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spano.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for coming tonight. You've heard a lot of discussion about policies and things that we want to do and things that we've done and the work that needs to happen. For those of you who are residents of St. Louis Park, I think we live in a little bit of a bubble where we expect that every community functions like this. And not every community does function like this. And so I just want to tell everyone who's here, thank you on behalf of the City Council and certainly for myself for giving us the opportunity to work with you to create a more just and equitable community. You have no idea how many times my colleagues, when I'm out talking to them about policy, they literally will just say like, well, what are you guys working on right now? Because that's the next hot thing. I'm gonna have to talk about that next at my city council meeting if you guys are working on it. And that's an honest to God, true story. It happens all the time. But we don't get that freedom without all of you giving us that opportunity. And so I just wanna say thank you for that. When I ran 4 years ago, I sent a letter out afterwards saying that I was going to work every day as long as I could to make St. Louis Park a safer, more prosperous, and more generous community. And by all 3 measures, in almost every single way, we are hitting the mark there. Always more work to be done, always more work to be done. But we are doing good work, and I want to continue doing that work to grow and refine and reimagine our community as we move forward. The last thing that I will say is that we are talking about taking on a lot of big, heavy, hard things. And I always tell people, easy is for other cities. St. Louis Park does the stuff that's hard because that's the stuff that's worth doing. And so together, our residents and our council and our city staff, which we have not talked about at all tonight, but I want to be clear, We may make decisions up here, our city staff are the ones who carry them out, and so you owe them all a big debt of thanks. So I would just ask you, please, if you haven't already, because City Hall is open for early voting, vote for me on November 5th for mayor. Jake Spano, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boulier.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you all for taking a big chunk of your day, of your night to be here today. And I hope that you leave this room with not only good answers, but also more questions. More questions that I hope that you can address to us, and especially to me, for the next few days until November 5th, when you decide to have me as your first choice for mayor. I want to dedicate my participation tonight to my two boys who've been sacrificing their time with me so I can do door-to-door knocking. My boys, Alexandros and Adam. And those two boys shared with me a vision that I want to share with you tonight. It's a vision of a city where we collaborate, where we participate. As I said before, I've been doing mediation for about 10 years. I am seasoned to be in the middle, trying to see the middle ground and try to hear from 2-3 different very contentious opinions. And it's the beauty of being a mediator, that you are able to see right on the spot. This is the point. And what I see for the city of St. Louis Park is not only what has been happening, but also giving a safe and secure and prosperous city that could leave a legacy for not only our children, but for a role model for other cities, with a wise use of our taxes, with a proper and functioning strategic planning for our specific projects, and that in the end will benefit the reason why we're here, which is all of you. You paid for us to be here, and as a public officials, that's our due diligence to be your voice. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like us to give a round of applause to our candidates for their wonderful entry.